So today's daf is Gittin Tezvav, but we're going to start on Gittin Yudaled around 20 lines from the bottom on 14b. Gemara is discussing this idea of whether or not if you ask an agent to bring something to another person on your behalf, that agent has acquired it on behalf of the other person. So the Gemara suggests on the bottom of 14b, the Gemara cites a Baraisa that actually says that this is a five-way dispute. The Gemara says Tanaihi. Maybe this is, let's say that Holach Kizachi, that whether or not the agent acquires it is a Tanaihi, is a Machokas Tanayim the Tanya, because we learned Holach Mano Aponi. Let's say Reuven says to Shimon, take my money to Levi. Big show, and then Shimon was taking the money and looking for Levi V'lo, and he doesn't find him. He has to bring the money back to Reuven. But let's say Meis Mishalech. Let's say Reuven is dead by that point also. So who does he give it to? So we have five opinions. First, Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Yaakov Amru Yachzor Yorshim Mishalech. They say it goes back to the heirs of the one who sent it. Others say Yorshim Mishin Ishtalchulo. Goes to the heirs of the one to whom it was sent. That's the second opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Amar Mishem Rabbi Yaakov Shamar Mishem Rabbi Meir Mitzvah Kaim Divrei Ames. He says it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead, which means that you're going to send it to the one to fulfill his wishes, but you're not required to by law of the other person hasn't acquired it. Levi hasn't acquired it, but you're going to send it to him because it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead. They split it. The Kanamro and in Balval they say that the agent can choose whichever one he wants. And now we have, after these five opinions, we have an incident. Amar Rabbi Shimon Hanasi Yadai Hayamaisev Amar Yachzuru Yorshim Mishalech. He said, I had such an incident, and they said, send it back to the heirs of the one who sent it. So Gemara says, isn't this a case of whether or not they're arguing about it, whether or not the Holech Kizachi, whether or not if you ask somebody to bring it to somebody else that the agent acquires it on behalf of the third party. The Tanakama Savar, the first opinion, i.e., this is Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Yaakov, their opinion, Holechav Kisli, he hasn't acquired it, therefore it goes back to the one who sent it. Excuse me, that's the Tanakama, it says Yachzru Mashaleach. It goes back to the one who sent it because he hasn't acquired it. Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Yaakov are the position that it goes to the heirs of the one who sent it, because they say that the one who sent it, he hasn't acquired on behalf of the third party. And they say even though the one who sent it has died, we don't say it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the deceased. The Yeshomrim, and then the third position says that the agent acquired is on behalf of the third party, and so therefore you have to give it to the Levi, the third party. The agent hasn't acquired it. However, you have to still give it to the third party. Where Mishalech, the one who sent it, has died, we say it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead. And then the Chachamim say Yachloku. They say you split it. Misafku, they're not sure. The Kanamro and above all, they said the agent gets to choose because they say Shuda Adif. It's best to let the agent choose. Rabbi Shimon Hanasi, Rabbi Shimon Hanasi is just telling us the incident. So then we see that this is a five-way dispute about whether or not we say the agent has acquired it. The Gemara said no, but Bari Kuliyama or Pligi. If the person had been healthy, if the initial person, Reuven, who was sending it was healthy, everybody would agree that the agent is not acquired on behalf of the third party. And here what we're talking about is a case of a shchivara, where the agent who sent it where the person who sent it was himself sick. And the shchivara, we're arguing about whether or not the shchivara's words have the force of law. And this is the dispute between Rebbe Lazar and the Rabbanan, the Tanan, because we went to the Mishnah Baba Basra. Let's say somebody is sick and he's just giving out his possessions, but he's doing it orally without any formal transaction. The Rebbe Lazar says, it doesn't matter to me if he's sick. If it's land, you can only acquire it with money, a contract, or a proprietary act. That's how the transaction takes place. And if it's movable properties, you have to do mashicha, you have to pull it. So Rebbe Elazar doesn't give any force of law to the person who's sick. Chachamim say no, that if the person is sick, then the acquisition can take place just by him saying something. We give this special dispensation to the sick person. So they said, so the Chacham said to Rebbe Elazar, don't you remember this? There was an incident with the children of the sons of Rochel, that she was sick. V'amra tinase kfinasi, and she said, "Give my necklace." Biti. She had this piece of jewelry. She said, "Give it to my daughter." Top of Tesvav Amalaf. Vihi b'shnei masar mana, and the necklace was worth a lot of money. It was worth 12 mana. Umesa, and then she died. And the sages upheld her word. So we see Chacham say to Rebbe Elazar that we do follow the verbal declaration of a shliv merah. So Amro Habnei Rochel. Rebbe Elazar responds, don't bring a proof to me from the sons of Rochel. Tikbarim imam. He curses them. He says that don't mention them at all in the base medrash. The rabbis don't like them, so they gave a psak against them because they didn't want them to be victorious in this court case because they thought that they were bad people. So don't argue for me about this case that she didn't want to give the money to her sons. Her sons were bad people, and the sages didn't want to rule like them. So don't we want to say Tanakama, the Tanakama's position, it says it goes back to the one who sent it. He holds like Rebbe Elazar because he doesn't give any force of law to the Shlimer Rebbe. Rav Nasser, Rav Yaakov, not make Rebbe Elazar. Rav Nasser, Rav Yaakov will also say it goes back to the heirs of the one who sent it. They also hold like Rebbe Elazar. And Alpha Gav the Mace, and they say we don't think it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead. The Yesh Shomer, the one who says it goes to the third party, Kirabanan, they hold like the Rabbanan who say that Shlimera, since he was sick, we follow his position and we give it to the third party. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Shamar Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Shamar Shemar Meir Rebbe Elazar. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who said in the name of Rebbe Elazar, is who said in the name of Rebbe Meir, he holds like Rebbe Elazar that we don't say that we don't give force of law to the Shlimer. However, because the person who sent it died, we say, it's a mitzvah to fulfill his words. Therefore, send it to the Mishaleach's heirs send it to the person's heirs once the Mishaleach has died. The Chachamim say split it misafko. They're not sure, and so they say split it. And here we say that we give the person the choice, the agent to choose. Rabbi Shimon Nasi Ma'aseh Lashminan. So Mar says it's not a dispute in the case of Holech Kisli. It's just a dispute in the case of whether or not we give force of law to the Shliv Merah. Ibayu Rabbi Shimon Nasi Nasiu O Mishmei de Nasi Kamer. Was Rabbi Shimon Nasi an actual Nasi, or was he just citing the Nasi? Tashma Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Shimon Nasi. Well, it's like Rabbi Shimon Nasi. Vadayin Tibayalach. We still have a question. Nasiu o the Ka'amar Mishmei the Nasi. Is he an actual Nasi, or is he saying in the name of the Nasi? Gemara says, take it. Let's leave this question unresolved. Kufa Amar Rav Yosef Alachak Rabbi Shimon Nasi. So we wanted to laws like Rabbi Shimon Nasi, but how could it be? Rabbi Shimon Nasi says that it goes back to the remember what did Rabbi Shimon Nasi say? The Rabbi Shimon Nasi said that there was an incident, it went back to the heirs of the one who sent it. So the Gemara says, how could it be? It goes back to the heirs of the one who sent it. Don't we say that the words of the shlimer of the very sick person, they have the force of law? So why should it go back to the one who sent it? It should go back to the one to whom he was sending it. Versus Rav Yosef says, no, we're not talking about a case of shlimer, we're talking about a case of bari. So according to Rav Yosef, it really would be a five-way dispute about whether or not we say holech kisli dami. Where it says, but how could it be a healthy person? It says, goes back to the heirs of the one who sent it. It means he was sick. And Rav Yosef would have been in the position that it's a mitzvah to fulfill the words of the dead. So why does he say, if you adopt the approach that he was healthy, it says it goes back to the heirs of the one who sent it. And we say it's a mitzvah to fill the words of the dead. So in any event, he should have sent it to the person, to Levi, whom he was trying to send it to. Mar says, Tani Yachzor Mashiach. No, we change the words, change the text. He says he sent it back to the one who sent it, to Reuven. And so we don't have a proof from there. So we have, we will return to you on maybe comma, but now we have the second maybe. First chapter begins with maybe, one who brings a get from overseas that he has to say fanai nachtam. Remember, we saw at the very beginning a dispute between Rabbah and Rava. Rabbah says, because the reason why you have to say, the agent has to say fanai nachtam is because when they're not experts in Shema, we want to make sure the get was done with the right intent. And Rava says it's to do kiyum shtaros, is to certify the document, to make sure that two witnesses on it were good witnesses. And the Gemara concluded that even Rava holds like Rava, that they're really, according to Rava, there's two reasons. One reason is to make sure that it was done with proper intent. And the second reason is because we want to make sure that the document is certified properly. So now the Gemara says, maybe get me Medina Sayyam. Somebody who brings this get from overseas, like we saw before, but this time he doesn't say the full b'fanai nechtam. This time he says b'fanai nechtav, avolo b'fanai nechtam. He just says it was written before me. He doesn't say it was signed before me. Or he says b'fanai nechtam, avolo b'fanai nechtam. Or he says it was signed but not written before me. Or he says b'fanai nechtav kulo. The whole get was written before me b'fanai nechtam chatzio, but only half of it was signed in front of me. Only one witness signed it in front of me. Or he says b'fanai nechtam chatzio, b'fanai nechtam kulo. Or if he says half of it was written and the whole thing was signed, possible. It's going to be disqualified in all those cases. And the Gemara is going to go into more analysis of this. Let's say you have one witness, one agent brings it, says it was written before me. The other one says it was signed before me. It's disqualified. Possible. If two people say it was written before me, and one says it was signed before me, it's disqualified. Rabbi Yehuda says that case is okay. So the Gemara is going to go into all these cases. If one person says it was written before me, and two people say it was signed before me, then it's going to be kosher. So the Gemara says, why do we need all this case again? We already said in the first case, the first mission of our track, that you have to say fanai nachtam. So for sure, if he says fanai nachtam but not fanai nachtam, it's no good. Or fanai nachtam but not fanai nachtam, it's no good. Why does the Gemara have to repeat it? Didn't we already say this one time? Or maybe get me If you bring the get from overseas, you need to say fanai nachtam. The Gemara says, well, if it was just from that case, if it was just from the first case of our Mishnah, first Mishnah of our tractate, we said you need to say it lechatchila, ideally, but if you didn't say it, it's still be kosher. So that's why we're saying that this to tell us that even lechatchila, that even b'diavad it's a requirement. If you don't do it, it's not kosher. The Gemara says that if you say half of it was written in front of me and half of it was signed before me, if you say half of it was written in front of me and all of it was signed in front of me, it's disqualified. Mar says, "Hi chatzio, which half was written in front of me?" And that we're going to say that even though it was entirely signed and half that was written in front of me, it's still no good. So which half was written in front of me? It's still no good. Hi chatzio, and if you say it's the first half, which is what we call the Torah, which is the part that has the names and the dates. If you want to say that's the part, the Gemara says, but doesn't Rebbe Lazar say the position that you only need to write one line of that with Shema, of that part with the right intent? So why do you say that if half of it was written, it's no good, but you only need one line of that to be written properly? So we're saying the last half was written with intent, but the part which is called the tofes, it's like the template. In order for it to have been okay, we needed the toref, the unusual parts to be written with proper intent. If you say the entire get was written in front of me and half of it was signed in front of me, it's disqualified. Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda taught So we just said that if the agent comes and says the whole get was written in front of me and half of it was signed in front of me, it's disqualified. And Rav Chisda's mechadesh, and Rashi points out that he's adding his own logic, and he says, "I'm going to teach you a chiddush that if even two people come from the marketplace and they say we want to testify about the second signature, because this agent says I only know about the first signature." And remember, we said Rava says the only reason why you need it is for kiyum shtaros. So he says, "Well, I'll be able to certify the second witness. I certify the first witness, and we have two witnesses coming from the marketplace, and they're testifying about the second signature." So it's still going to be disqualified. What's the reason? So he teaches us this concept. Either you have to use the entire way you're proving this document is through the certification, meaning witnesses testify about the signatures on the document. Or we say the entire way has to go with the takanas chachamim, with the institution of the sages, which is that the testimony of the agent, the sages believe him. You can't mix and match different approaches. What's the reason for it? What's the reason why you need either kula b'kiyum maget or kula b'takanas chachamim? So Tosfos explains that if if the agent sees that the signature is going to be done by two witnesses, then he's not going to be so careful about his own one. So it's basically, the logic is that you can't mix and match, because once you mix and match, you're not going to be so careful. You're not going to assume the full responsibility. That's what Tosfos says. And Rava argues and says, no, we don't have to be concerned about that. And that's why Rava is going to come along with the second approach. The Ritva says a different approach, that since one signature is being upheld by two witnesses, then it's like certification in general. And so then they'll think, and then people come to make a mistake, and they'll think that the testimony of the agent on the other signature is also the same law of kiyum shtar. So we'll come to confuse it in general. So these are the two of the theories as to why why we say either kula b'takanas chachamim or kula b'kiyum maget. Why you can't mix and match. Maskef for Rava. So Rava argues, Mika Midi. So Rava says, is it really possible that if one person said it was kosher, that if the agent bringing it said that witness is kosher, it would have been okay. But now that there are two witnesses, possible it's disqualified, doesn't make sense. Rava says, even if this witness and somebody else, so what's the scenario? Rava says, where the agent combines with one witness from the marketplace and they testify about this second signature, it's still going to be disqualified. My timer, what's the reasoning? Also, because in general, we might confuse it with certification documents. And here we have a different law. Excuse me. In such a case where 3/4 of the testimony is relying upon one person, meaning to say, Rashi says this is from a case from Ksubos, that there are two witnesses who signed a contract and one of them died. And then the one witness comes and says, this is my signature. And then he's testifying with somebody else about the other signature. So now we have this one witness is really testifying to 3/4 of the document. And so therefore, we say by kiyum shtaros in general that that's no good, because it has to be al pishnayim edim, it has to be on the basis of two witnesses. And here, one witness is getting 3/4 of the document. And so therefore, if we're going to allow this by a get, we might come to allow it by kiyum shtaros in general. Ma'askefar Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi challenges that. Mika midi diu masikle iu akue dibura kasher, that if this witness had if this agent had testified to the whole document, it would have been kosher. But now that he has one with him, it's going to be disqualified. the similar argument to what Rava made, but Rav is saying if this agent had just come by himself, it would have been okay. But now that you bring another witness with him, you're going to say it's disqualified. Even if he says, I myself am the second witness, which he's allowed to do in general, he's allowed to say, this is my signature, is going to be disqualified. My time, you have to do one or the other. You either have to do entirely through the certification of the document or entirely through the Takanim v'Chachamim that we believe the agent who brings it. Tanan, so now the Mishnah is going to challenge the law of Rav Chisda. Remember, Rav Chisda said that if the agent says, that one witness was signed before me, and then you bring two witnesses to certify the others, it's no good, because we have to say either entirely through the Takanim v'Chachamim or entirely through the Kiyum Haget, through the certification. So tonight we learned in our Mishnah, B'fanai nachtav kuo, b'fanai nachtav chatzio. It says in our Mishnah that if he says the entire get was written in front of me and half was signed, it's going to be pasul, and then it's going to be disqualified. So what's the story with the other half? If you say that nobody's certifying the other signature, well, for sure, in the earlier case, in the Mishnah, it says if one says b'fanei nachtam and one says b'fanei nachtam, the haikam is ma'asid akol, tzim v'haikam ma'asid akol, tzim apostle. In that case, it's disqualified. For sure, chatzio, that if somebody's testifying to even one of the signatures, for sure, it would be disqualified. In the previous case, somebody was testifying to both of the signatures. Here, somebody's only testifying to one of the signatures. For sure, will be disqualifying. So the Gemara is going to say, rather, our Mishnah is really either going to be teaching us the Chiddush of Rava or Rav Ashi, but not like Rav Chisda. So the Gemara says, no, I'm Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, according to your logic, why does our Mishnah have to say, if he says it was written before me, but it was not signed before me, why do we have to say it's disqualified? Afterwards, it says in the Mishnah, another one, is disqualified. And if when there's testimony about one witness, it's disqualified, for sure, if there's no testimony about the signatures, it's disqualified. So according to Rav Chisda, why does it have to say if it was not signed before me, it's disqualified? If when there's even one signature, it's disqualified. For sure, when there's no signatures, it's disqualified. So the style of the Mishnah, it says a smaller chiddush and then a bigger chiddush. And also the question you asked on me is going to be the same thing. So therefore, you don't have a proof against me. So Gemara says, so since we said that you can't mix and match from different halachic mechanisms, Gemara is going to give a couple of examples of also where we show that you can't mix and match. So one of the areas on Shabbos is that you're allowed to carry in a private domain, a private domain you're allowed to carry without concern. So what's the way that something becomes a private domain? And if it has a mechitza, a wall of 10 tefachim around the property. So it says Rav Chisda, Gidur Chamisha Umechza Chamisha. If you have like a ditch, a bankment on the side of the road of 5 tefachim, and then you have a wall above it of 5 tefachim, aim it starfin. You can't combine the two. Either it has to be entirely the wall or entirely the embankment. You can't combine them. But Maremer says you do combine them. And the halacha is you do combine them. By Ilfa, so Ilfa asked the following question. Now, we remember Ilfa from the Gemara in Tainis Chaf Aleph, where Ilfa was the one with Rabbi Yochanan who went into business. Rabbi Yochanan said, "I need to stay in the yeshiva," but Ilfa said, "I could go into the world and I could go and I could still become a Talmid Chacham." And indeed, Ilfa stood on the edge of the ship and he said, "Find me a single brisa I don't know," and he knew everything. So even though he went into the world of business, he still was a person who was a tremendous Torah scholar. So Ilfa asked the question, "Yadayim tahoras l'chatzayin or ain't tahoras l'chatzayin?" Are we able to do netilas yadayim to purify our hands if we only do it halfway or not? So this is the question that he's asking. Yadayim tahoros lechatzayin or ain't tahoros lechatzayin. Can you purify your hands halfway? And I was thinking that this question really relates to Ilfa's life, because Ilfa had this argument with Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said you can't go into the business world and be a great Rosh Yeshiva, and Ilfa said you can, and that's why he said you could do it halfway. And that's kind of his question here: can you purify your hands halfway or not? So the Gemara says, "Hey Chidami, what's the question? You aim to come mashu beitrei miravias. If you wash 2 hands from 1 revius of water, you put both your hands under the water of Atanan. Miravias noton liyadayim le'achad v'afilu shnayim. We have a specific Mishnah that says if you want to wash your hands, Mishnah Yadayim, you can wash not only 1 hand but even 2 hands from a revius of water. So it must be that you wash your hands 1 at a time. The kamashi chada yade, that you wash 1 hand and afterwards you want to wash the other hand, then you don't wash them at the same time. And that was Elfa's question, whether or not if you wash your hands in this way, his hands are going to be purified. It can't be vatanana noto yado achas benatilov achas b'shtifa yadav toros. But you don't even have to do both washing them with the cup. You even can do 1 washing and the other one just immersing it in the river. It's okay. So for sure, you don't have to wash them both at the exact same time. Ella, what's his question? The kamashi palga to yade. So the question is, if he washes his hand half at a time. First, he washes his hand until half the hand, and then afterwards he dries his hand, and then he washes the other hand. Is that going to be acceptable? So that's the question that Elfa is asking. How could that be a question? Where it says, "Amri debei Rabbi Yanai, yadayim ein taharos l'chatzayin." Didn't Rabbi Yanai say you don't wash your hands halfway? You can't do that. It's not going to be acceptable. So the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha deika mashka tofeach." No, that what happens is he goes back and washes his second hand. He hadn't really completely dried the first hand, so there's still water on it. So since there's still water on it, whether or not it's connecting the 2 washings to make it 1, and it's as though he washed his whole hand at once. Or do we say it's not like it's connected, and it's like he washed only half the hand, and so therefore it's not good for purification. So that's today's daf. We're going to complete this question that Elfa was asking, God willing, on tomorrow's daf. A beautiful daf today. We can go on. We just stopped the recording. We'll go on for another couple of minutes.